Hi guys, right now I will discuss cash management. So what is the assumption that we have in cash management? It is that idle cash is invested on short-term securities and sold when the need arises. Therefore, if a company needs cash, what they will do is to sell their short-term securities so that they can convert it to cash. The question is, why short-term securities? It is because short-term securities yields interest or return. Even if the return on short-term securities is lower than long-term securities, it is better for the company to invest its idle cash on short-term securities as long as it gains profit or given that it gains profit rather than doing nothing at all or keeping the cash idle. Secondly is short-term securities are better given that they can easily be sold. The element of short-term securities is they have an active market. It means that if the company wants to sell short-term securities, it can easily be sold and it can easily be converted into cash. Therefore, given that the nature of short-term securities that it is liquid, therefore, most of the companies invest in short-term securities. So what are the two costs that are often involved in management of cash? First is we have transaction cost. Every time the company sells its short-term securities, they will incur transaction cost. So this is the transaction cost arising from selling short-term securities. Meanwhile, we also have the holding cost. This is the opportunity cost of holding cash or keeping idle cash. What is the opportunity cost of keeping idle cash? That is the opportunity cost of investing them in short-term securities and getting a profit from it. So that's why keeping a lot of cash on hand is an opportunity cost in itself, given that the company cannot take advantage of the opportunity to gain more interest or to gain returns if and only if they will invest this cash in short-term securities. However, there is an inverse relationship between holding cost and transaction cost. If you sell securities frequently, or if you sell securities in small amounts, the holding cost decreases, but the transaction cost increases. Why is it so? Given that you will frequently sell your short-term securities, it means that the transaction cost will also increase. Given that there will be more transactions that the company needs to have during the year. So that is number one. Meanwhile, on the other hand, if you sell less frequently or if you sell securities in large amounts, the transaction cost decreases but holding cost increases. It is because if the company will hold a lot of cash, it also means that the opportunity cost of holding cash is higher, given that there is a high possibility that there is cash or there will be idle cash. Cash that is not used for investment or cash that will not gain any return at all, given that it is not invested in short-term securities. Given the inverse relationship between holding cost and transaction cost, we need to strike a balance or we need to find the point in which the total cost of holding cash or the total cost of cash is at its lowest. So what do we call that model, or what do we call that formula? We call it the Baumol model. In Baumol model, we want to find out how much is the optimum cash balance. The formula for Baumol model is patterned after economic order quantity. So as you can observe, in the formula is reminiscent of economic order quantity. So the formula here is 2 times annual cash requirement times transaction cost divided by the opportunity cost of holding cash. Let us have problem solving. Sentimental Incorporated has the following information. The annual cash requirement or withdrawals is 100,000 pesos. The transaction cost is 100 pesos. And the opportunity cost of holding cash is 5%. What is required of us is to find the optimal cash balance, the number of transactions a year, the total transaction cost, and total holding cost. So first is, we will find the optimal cash balance using the Baumol model. The formula here is 2 times the annual cash requirement of 100,000 pesos times transaction cost of 100 pesos divided by the holding cost or the opportunity cost, which is 5%. So trying to substitute everything in the formula, we get 20,000 pesos. What is 20,000 pesos then? 20,000 pesos is the optimal cash balance. It means that if the company has 20,000 pesos of cash balance, it is the point in which they can minimize the total cost related to cash. And then we will compute the number of transactions per year. The formula here is annual cash requirement divided by optimal cash balance. So the annual cash requirement is 100,000 pesos. We will divide it by 20,000 pesos. Therefore, the number of transactions per year are 5 transactions. So there will be 5 transactions per year. Since it is already clear how many transactions per year, we can now proceed to the total transaction cost. In total transaction cost, we can find this by multiplying the number of transactions a year times cost per transaction. So we will multiply 5 transactions times 100 pesos. The total transaction cost is 500 pesos. And then finally, we will also compute for annual holding cost. For total holding cost, we can find this by dividing optimal cash balance divided by 2 times 5%. So the optimal cash balance is 20,000 pesos. So we will divide it by 2. So that will be 10,000 pesos times 5%. Therefore, the total holding cost of the company is 500 pesos.